certainly we've got one of the best ones, if not the best one, on Fox Big Noon Saturday. There has been no better offensive football team in the Power 5 than Texas A&M when they play on the road. All the stakes on the line for Kalen DeBoer. And if they lose to Auburn, watch out. The distraction bowl of all distraction bowls. What is Lane Kiffin going to do after the Egg Bowl?
The country. A day like today is why we love college football.
Hey, welcome into the program. This is the Joel Klatt Show. I'm Joel Klatt. This show is brought to you by Graduate by Hilton. We thank them for their support. As always, when you're in a college town, you're going to a game, make sure you check out Graduate by Hilton. Hey, if you have not done so, please go subscribe to the channel. That would really be awesome. We've got a lot of cool content out there. You can go on YouTube and find us at Joel Klatt Show. You can also find us wherever you like to social media at Joel Klatt Show out on social media, and then you can rate and review us wherever you're listening to these podcasts. Now, we've got picks and previews here today. We've also got a big happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there. I hope that you are enjoying not only a day with your friends and family, but also consuming football, whether it's NFL football or college football. It's going to be an amazing slate of games and contests across both levels all weekend long. And certainly we've got one of the best ones, if not the best one, on Fox Big Noon Saturday, as Gus, Ginny, and I will have the call for the game, Ohio State and Michigan. Now, these picks have been heating up a little bit. I know that I was ice cold, absolute freezer box early in the year, and yet we have come back. In the last 3 weeks, we are 11-3 and now 31-34 on the year as we get all set for this week's games. Okay, here we go. Live in Ann Arbor, Michigan hosts the number one team in the country, Ohio State, in the game. Now, I think it's important to understand how these two programs have built themselves. Now, this is from an outsider's perspective, but Ohio State has built themselves as a program that can perennially contend for and potentially win national championships, and they were able to do that a year ago. Michigan, on the other hand, since COVID, under Jim Harbaugh, decided to specifically target and build themselves to match up with and beat Ohio State, which they've now done 4 straight times. So that's where we come into this game is a matchup, a style. These two rosters, what are they good at? Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? And how will that play out in this ball game on Saturday in the Big House? That's always a fascinating aspect of this because obviously Ohio State, you would say, has the advantage from the skill perspective and the speed perspective. And then at least in the last 4 years, Michigan has had the advantage in the trenches. And they've been able to be more physical, in particular on the defensive line last year, specifically with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Michigan wants a game that's close in the second half so that they can continue to lean into that physical nature. Everything that they're built on and about starts with their physical nature, defensively and offensively, which is why when I talk with anybody in that building, all they talk about is give us a chance, make it a close game in the fourth quarter. And they feel like that toughness will pay off for them in the fourth quarter, which it has by and large in the last 4 years. Now, they didn't kill Ohio State with the run game maybe the last 2 years in the fourth quarter like they did in 21 and 22, but they were good enough. And they got the proper conversions. They got enough conversions with the run game late in order to go get late scores and ultimately win the game. And last year, obviously, was, let's face it, a pretty shocking result as Michigan came into that game as 20-point dogs. So, candidly, I don't care what the line is in this game. This is a much better version of Michigan than went to Columbus last year and ended up beating the eventual national champions. It would shock me if this game is not close late, which is exactly what Michigan wants. By the way, weather forecast, exactly what Michigan wants as well. 30s, 50% chance of snow. I mean, if you wake up in your Sharon Moore and you see that weather forecast, you're like, yes, please. That's exactly what he would hope for. On the injury front, both programs are dealing with injuries right now. On the Ohio State side, it's Lorenzo Styles, the defensive back, the nickel back. He's questionable. And then obviously the two big ones, the wide receivers, which did not play last week, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Now, I remain optimistic that both of those guys will be on the field. Jeremiah Smith was actually on Caleb Downs' podcast earlier this week and basically alluded to the fact that, like, yeah, I'll be ready to go. I do think Carnell Tate will also be ready to go. I think the question for me more so is about effectiveness rather than availability. These guys will likely play. I remain very optimistic that they will play, but it is about effectiveness because, again, these guys are like sports cars, right? You get a dump truck in there, it doesn't matter if there's a flat tire, a dump truck can still be a dump truck, right? But when you are out on the outside and it's about precision and timing and skill and speed, it's more like a sports car. And one little thing that's wrong with a sports car doesn't allow that car to perform at the top end of its ability. Well, it's the same thing with wide receivers. So the effectiveness of Smith and Tate, I think, will be something that all of us are interested in early in that game and certainly be well aware of. On the Michigan side, it does feel like Jordan Marshall, who hurt his shoulder against Northwestern, I think he's probably going to be on the field. I remain optimistic that he will play. Again, effectiveness rather than availability. I think it's probably a pain tolerance deal with Jordan Marshall. He was so effective. After Justice Haynes, of course, went out. Justice Haynes was probably the best back in the country. Then all of a sudden, Marshall stepped in when Haynes got injured and had to have the foot surgery, and Marshall was outstanding, and that run game seemed to be the vintage Michigan run game. He went down against Northwestern. They were able to run the ball well against Maryland, again, leaning into that offensive line. I think Marshall will be on the field, but I think a bigger question would be Max Bredesen. And I know he doesn't touch the football a lot, but when you're going to try to lean into the physical nature, you've got to have the guy that you would say epitomizes that physical nature, and that's Max Bredesen, number 44. Now, if you watch Michigan at all, which I have intently all year long, you would know that Max Bredesen is about as important a player to their offense as anybody, and he doesn't even touch the ball. It's because of his threat as a blocker. Again, toughness, physicality. The ball generally finds him. Wherever he's going, the ball follows because he's devastating as a blocker. He was in a boot and crutches after the Maryland game, and so his availability is called into question. And his effectiveness is called into question. Now, knowing Max as well as I do, and it's, I think this guy is as tough as they come in college football, and I would be shocked if he doesn't try at least to play. Again, effectiveness over availability. Now, when you get into the actual matchup here, let's start when Michigan has the ball. They're best, and we all know it, when they're able to establish the run and then allow their young quarterback, Bryce Underwood, to throw the football off of the run game. Whether it's him getting outside of the pocket, utilizing those movement throws, they're not as good if you put them into a box where he doesn't have the RPO, he doesn't have the play action, and he just has to sit there as a drop back passer. Plus, that's a matchup that is really tough for a young quarterback because this Ohio State defense disguises their coverage as well as anybody. They also match in coverage as well as anybody, whether it's man or zone. They produce tight windows for the quarterback to throw the ball into. So it's tough to know what defense they're in. And even if you do know what defense they're in, the windows are very tight. So Michigan cannot get into a situation where they're in a drop back game against this Ohio State team. The pass rush, even though it hasn't been devastated, has been effective. In particular, when you get into those positions where the quarterback has to sit there and drop back. We saw that last week against Rutgers with Caden Curry. So them running the football, speaking of Michigan, is paramount in this game, and I think we all know that. Getting to those tight ends, getting the ball out to Andrew Marsh. Patricia will have some disguises cooked up. Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator. That's going to be a great matchup to watch. Then when Ohio State has the ball, here's the key for Ohio State. Be yourself. Last year, I felt like they got sucked into trying to win the toughness battle, and they weren't going to do that against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. And Michigan was allowed, or they were able, to just sit there in what I would consider to be a very safe pass defense. Two safeties back. They were able to double team Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka at times and stop the run with a light run box where they didn't have to commit resources in order to stop the run. Now, they don't have Grant and Graham anymore. So do they have to commit resources to stop the running game of Ohio State? That's question number one. Question number two is, what type of game plan is Brian Hartline and Ryan Day going to use in this ballgame? Because if they're themselves and they attack on the outside and more specifically down the field and attack those safeties from Michigan, that would be advantage Ohio State. They did not do that a year ago, and they got sucked into this run game where they did not want to throw the football on the outside and they played too safe. I don't think they're going to do that. They learned the lesson last year. We saw that in the playoff when they came out and turned into the Death Star supernova that just attacked down the field against Tennessee and against Oregon. So if that lesson bleeds into this version of the game, I think that we'll see Ohio State be a little bit more aggressive. They got Smith on the outside. They got Tate on the outside. They got Max Clare, a great tight end. They need to attack those safeties of the Michigan Wolverines. Going to be a great game. Big noon kickoff is going to be live at 9 a.m. Lots of guests, lots of big stars on the 3-hour edition of Big Noon Kickoff. And then Gus, Ginny, and I will have the call of the game at noon on Fox. All right, we move on. Let's get to some picks here. Texas A&M traveling to face Texas. A&M obviously on a magical ride. They're undefeated. They're sitting there number 3 in the country. Texas scored 52 points against Arkansas last week, but they also gave up 37. I think that's a problem. Why? Because Arkansas is terrible right now. They've lost 9 games in a row, and so getting yourself right offensively against Arkansas doesn't do much for me. However, this recent trend of poor defense from Texas is concerning. And specifically when you think about what A&M has done when they've been on the road this year, there has been no better offensive football team in the Power 5 than Texas A&M when they play on the road. They've scored 38 plus in almost every single game that they've played on the road. And this offense, even though they were quiet in the first half against South Carolina, they can get themselves together and be very explosive right away. I really like Marcel Reed when he's not turning the football over. His explosiveness, the speed of the wide receivers on the outside, and their balance with the ability to run the football. I think they're going to be able to score points in this game because, again, the recent trend of Texas defense has not been great. And then the other matchup, when Texas has the ball. If you look at when Texas has struggled this year, it's been when they are unable to protect the quarterback. The run game has not been great all year. And I know that A&M's run defense is not particularly strong, but does it matter in a game in which Texas is not great running the football? Maybe not. Meanwhile, the pass defense, and more specifically the pass rush for the Aggies, is elite. Cassius Howell is a heck of a player. He's on his way to an All-American year. And if you've got Arch Manning sitting back in the pocket and he's being pressured, that's exactly what they've struggled with at times against Ohio State, certainly against Georgia, against Florida. These are the moments when Texas struggles offensively. So you've got the Aggies who are great offensively, in particular on the road. They're strong in the one spot you would want to be strong in when you're facing this Texas offense. I got to tell you, even on the road, I know that A&M is favored by 2.5, but don't you just see that the matchup favors Texas A&M? Plus, just think of it from a mental standpoint. This A&M team understands that they have to win to get themselves into the SEC championship by all measures. And I know Texas feels like they might have an outside shot at the playoff, but boy, this A&M team feels like they're playing for everything. We know that it's going to be an intense rivalry, and we know that that's difficult to win on the road in this rivalry, even though Texas was able to do so a year ago. I just look at matchup, and so many of these games and the results in these games are going to be dictated on matchup. And I think this is a bad matchup for Texas because, again, the strength of Texas A&M is exactly where you would want to be strong to face Texas. I'm concerned about Texas's defense. A&M is really good offensively, 38 points in all 4 road games this year. I think Reed is a threat. The only reason it's 2.5 right now is because it's in Austin. A loss would potentially cost A&M a bye. They almost certainly wouldn't get into the SEC championship game. They've got everything to play for, and you're telling me all you have to do is win by a field goal? I've got to take A&M, and I've got to give the points. I've got to give the 2.5. As talented as I think Texas is, they're not strong at wide receiver. They don't run the ball particularly well, and I think A&M's defense, and more specifically Cassius Howell, is going to have a field day. Meanwhile, Texas on defense, they've struggled. Anthony Hill, he's got a hand injury. We don't know if he's going to be available, or we don't know if he is available, how effective he's going to be, just to back to that point that we talked about with Ohio State and Michigan. It just doesn't impress me when you beat Arkansas that way. Arkansas has been terrible this year. They obviously fired their coach. I'm taking A&M. I think that they cover. This is a 38-28 game. Aggies win on the road in Austin. They're undefeated. They go to Atlanta to play for the SEC championship game. Up in the Pacific Northwest, number 6, Oregon, 6.5-point favorites at Washington. What a wonderful game and rivalry this one is. Oregon looks like a team on a mission right now. We saw that last week against USC. Really like what they've been able to do, in particular, getting much better and more stout in their defensive front 7. I saw them early in the year against Northwestern. Dan Lanning was lamenting the fact that they did not play well in their defensive front 7, and they have achieved what they emphasized, which was getting better in that moment. They got great length. The edges are fantastic. And when you look at what Washington has done offensively against the best defenses that they've faced this year, it hasn't been much. Really, the three best defenses that Washington has faced this year has been Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. And I know Wisconsin hasn't had a great year, but that's a team that can stop the run and defensively knows what they're doing under Coach Tressel up there, the defensive coordinator. So you look at what Washington did in those three games. It wasn't much offensively. 10 against Wisconsin, under 10 against both Michigan and Ohio State. They scored 7 against Michigan. They scored 6 against Ohio State. That, to me, is a struggle, and it's a trend, and that trend might continue. They're banged up, by the way, at the skill positions. Jonah Coleman and Denzel Boston both battling injury. They both barely played last week in the win over UCLA. Oregon was great against USC's run game. They held them to 52 rush yards. That's the second fewest by a Lincoln Riley team. Washington's offense has struggled against top-level defenses. Oregon, yeah, they've got some O-line issues, but, man, they've got answers. They can run the football. Dante Moore is incredible. Unless you pressure Dante Moore, he's going to eat you up. Kenyon Sadiq had a big game last week against USC. He was a monster in that ball game. We've seen Dante Moore come up big in tough road environments. That last drive against Iowa, now he's going to have to do it on the road against Washington. They're given 6.5, and I've got to take Oregon in this game. If you're telling me that all they have to do is win by 7, win by a touchdown, I've got to take that. And more specifically, because of Washington's struggles against good defenses. Again, it's a matchup thing for me. Oregon wins the game on the road, 28-17. Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks almost certainly get a bye, and outside chance, pending results, that they would even jump into the top 4 and get a bye. So they would certainly get a home game. I think I said bye first. They would certainly get a home game in the playoff if they win. Outside shot at a bye into the top 4. And you never know what happens. Like, let's say Michigan wins, Oregon would be right there with a chance to go play for a second straight Big Ten title. Let's go down south. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia's favored by 13.5 in this game, and they seem to be coming around and playing their best football at the right time for Kirby Smart. We know that they waffled around and had all those multiple possession deficits earlier in the year, but now lately in November, Georgia has turned it on. And they've been very good. If Georgia loses this game, they could lose out on a bye. They can also still make the SEC championship game with a win if either Bama or A&M lose this weekend. So everything's on the line for Georgia. Plus, let's not forget that they played that incredibly difficult multiple overtime game against Georgia Tech last year. So I think that the Bulldogs will be giving their full attention to this game against Georgia Tech, regardless of what happened to Tech last week against Pitt. Georgia Tech is in a bit of a tailspin to finish the year. Tech has lost 2 of their last 3. The defense has been really bad. The only win was a last-second win over Boston College, who has 1 win this season. The Tech defense is allowing 41 points over the last 3 games. That's not good. Georgia rounding into form. Tech gave them everything that they could handle a year ago. You get the full focus of Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs. Haynes King is going to do his best, but he's going to have all the eyes of the Georgia defense on him. And that Georgia defense, which has not been good rushing the quarterback at all this year, last in the SEC sacking the quarterback, showed up against Arch. That game against Texas, all of a sudden, that front 7 looked like a Georgia front 7. Again, rounding into form. I know that C.J. Allen looks doubtful, but again, I trust the totality of that roster. I trust the schematics of Kirby Smart, the urgency of Kirby Smart, and more specifically, the fact that they had that really difficult game against Tech last year. This one's going to be in the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, likely a large Georgia contingent at this one. 13.5 is a big number, but I think Georgia covers the 13.5. Again, you look at the way that they've played lately. Tech down, Georgia up. Take the trends. I've got Georgia 35, Georgia Tech 21. Georgia covers the 13.5. Miami at Pitt. Now, this is a monster game. Miami needs to win in order to keep pace and keep their playoff hopes alive. Meanwhile, Pitt still with a shot at an ACC championship game. Miami has been surging over the last 3 games to make their case for the playoff. I like the way they've been playing. Both teams can still make the ACC championship game, but Pitt has a little bit more of a clear path. They need a win plus either a Virginia or SMU loss, and then Pitt goes and plays for the ACC championship game, and they're 60 minutes away from going to the college football playoff. Pitt took care of Georgia Tech on the road last week. They ran for over 200 yards. Miami's defense has looked vulnerable in the run game. Against Virginia Tech, they allowed 235 and 7 per carry, when you strip out sacks. So again, matchup, trend, matchup, trend. I think we've got to look at these things, in particular in these late season, monumental games. Then you look at the weather. Miami is 3-6 on the road in November under Mario Cristobal. Are we due for that loss here? Might come at the hands of Pitt and in a situation that Miami never finds itself in. We talk about this in the NFL when the Dolphins have to go up and play like Buffalo in a late season game. Here's the weather. Low 30s. Doesn't look like snow on Saturday, but low 30s. Miami has not played a game that cold since 2013. That was at Pitt. Do I love Carson Beck in a gross, cold weather, bad field game? No. No, I don't. True freshman Mason Heischel has been good and safe with the football. I think that the way that they played early in that game against Georgia Tech makes me believe that they will be focused and ready to play. And again, Pat Narduzzi told us, hey, we focus on ACC games, and they didn't care about Notre Dame, played terrible. They care about Georgia Tech, played great on the road. I think they'll play great in this one. Don't love Miami in a game with this type of stakes in November and in this weather. Both of those things lead me to believe that Miami is going to get beat outright in this game. Miami's favored by 6.5. I think you got to take those points. I think Pitt wins this one 24-21 outright in the cold weather, and they keep themselves alive in the ACC championship game conversation, and they knock Miami out of the playoff discussion in what can only be a big sigh of relief for the playoff committee, which is sitting there, and they're trying to tell us that the game Notre Dame and Miami didn't matter, and they're going to get let off the hook. Alabama-Auburn. Iron Bowl is phenomenal. There's no doubt. Alabama is a 5.5-point favorite at Auburn. Auburn obviously reeling. Bama has to win this game to get into the playoff. They lose this one, they're out of the playoff. So all the stakes on the line for Kalen DeBoer. And trust me when I tell you this, all the goodwill that he was able to build up after that Florida State loss started to go out the window when they lost to Oklahoma. And if they lose to Auburn, watch out. And miss the playoff for the second straight year in his first 2 years in Tuscaloosa? Nope. They are not going to be happy about that. I said Oklahoma was a bad matchup for Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and we were right. And Auburn is not a bad matchup. In fact, it's a great matchup for Alabama. Auburn is not a good football team. They're a talented football team, but not a good football team. Those two things can be different and also both be true. Auburn's defense is well suited to play against the run. They're 11th in college football against the run, but they're not a dynamic pass defense, and that bears out in the numbers. They're 100th in the country defending the pass. That's a terrible matchup when you're going to face a team that doesn't care if they run the football at all. They don't care. Kalen DeBoer will just throw it around with Ty Simpson. Now, I know Ty Simpson threw a couple of bad interceptions last week, but if you look at his totality, the season in totality, he is careful with the football. They are dynamic in the passing game. That's exactly where you would want to attack this Auburn defense. So in my estimation, this is a matchup that favors Alabama. When Auburn has the ball, Ashton Daniels will be getting the start in this one, third start of the year, despite Deuce Knight playing super well against Mercer. Granted, against Mercer, can we not do the FCS thing in November? Can we not do that? I'm just going to side with Dan Lanning on this one. Let's hope that changes when the SEC plays 9 conference games. I think that'll be better for college football. I think it'll be better for SEC fans, by the way. Cam Coleman is a really good player out wide for the Tigers. Bama's going to have to certainly know where he's at. Bama has been giving up 65 rush yards to 4 different quarterbacks this year. Castellanos, Sellers, Pabula, Pavia. Both Daniels and Knight are mobile. That's the one area I think Auburn needs to focus on in order to get some sort of advantage in this game. Auburn is 2-6 in their last 8, folks. I mean, come on. I know it's a rivalry, and I know that it's in Jordan-Hare. And I get it that the games are closer when it's played at Auburn than when they're played in Tuscaloosa. I totally understand that. They had a close win against Arkansas and a win over Mercer. That's their 2 wins in their last 8. Like, come on. The game tends to be close in Auburn, but I don't think that I can, in good faith, say that Auburn is going to cover the 5.5. You tell me that Bama only needs to win by a touchdown, and I'm going to take it. Bama's going to cover the 5.5. I think that Ty Simpson throws for around 300, maybe 280, 285, 300, 3 touchdowns in this game. I think that Bama ends up winning I think that they get to the SEC championship game. They win this one 32-21. They cover the 5.5, and the Tide rolls in the Iron Bowl. Ole Miss at Mississippi State, the distraction bowl of all distraction bowls. What is Lane Kiffin going to do after the Egg Bowl? Hate that we're talking about this. I hate that we're talking about it for the Ole Miss players. I think that I feel bad for them. They are thrown into this because their coach won't sign an extension. And, Lane is going to sit here and he's going to try, and those that run cover for him are going to try to talk about that this is the calendar's fault. Well, then why wasn't it the calendar's fault for Kurt Cignetti or Rhett Lashley or Mike Elko or Dan Lanning or Matt Rule? They're facing the same calendar, folks, but all of a sudden it's only a problem like, oh, we got to let Lane off the hook because the calendar's a problem. The calendar's a problem for everybody. If Lane wants to leave a playoff team mid-playoff run, that's on him. He has agency and he can make choices, and there's consequences to those choices. Part of dragging this out is the distraction for his team in preparing for a rivalry game that might be close. Distractions are the quickest way to be defeated. Now, is Mississippi State good enough to beat Ole Miss? Probably not. Probably not. Ole Miss has an outside shot at the SEC championship game, but more importantly, they've got to win this one, I think, to get included into the playoff. Because if they lose the Egg Bowl, go to 10-2, and Lane decides to leave, I think that the committee has got an easy out. And as we've learned through the years, the College Football Playoff Committee will always take the path of least resistance. What do you think the path of least resistance is if Ole Miss loses their last game, they're 10-2, and they start getting compared to everybody else when their play caller leaves? I think it's a pretty easy conclusion. So I think Ole Miss has to win in order to get themselves into the playoff. Mississippi State has given some teams some problems in Starkville. They beat Arizona State earlier in the year. They lost in overtime to Tennessee, Texas. Overall, they've lost 6 of their last 7, however. What I like for Ole Miss is that they can lean into the run game. Kewan Lacey has been amazing. He averages 100 yards per game. He's got 19 touchdowns. That's tied for the most in college football. Meanwhile, Mississippi State is 120th in the country in run defense. 120th. They've given up 300 plus in their last 2 games versus Missouri and Georgia. Matchup. And by the way, the quickest way to overcome a distraction is to lean on something that you know will be there, which is the run game. If you were leaning on a pass game or creativity with offensive schematics, so on and so forth, I would be more worried for Ole Miss, but I'm not. I'm not worried for Ole Miss in this game. They're favored by 6.5. Trinidad Chambliss has been really good for Ole Miss this year. I think those players band together and they get the win, and then we'll find out what type of circus happens after the game. Lane can do whatever he wants. I really like Lane. I think Lane is great for college football. This situation, though, is not just the calendar's fault. Lane cannot just blame, or the people that want to run cover for him all over the place. And you're starting to see this. Oh, it's calendar's fault. Not the calendar's fault for Dan Lanning, Kurt Cignetti, Rhett Lashley, Mike Elko, right? So, there does need to be some responsibility for putting themselves in this position and putting himself in this position. Ole Miss wins it. They cover the 6.5. I think they win it 34-27 in the Egg Bowl. Let's recap these picks here that we've made so far today. Of course, I broke down the game. Go back and check that out. And then Texas A&M, they're favored by 2.5. I think that I would give the 2.5. I think A&M wins outright on the road. I think they win this ball game 38-28. I like A&M in that game. I think Oregon wins on the road against Washington. I will give the 6.5 in that one. That's a complete team. Georgia's rounding into form. I really like what Georgia is doing. I'm going to give the 13.5 over Georgia Tech, who is trending downward. Pitt wins outright. They're getting 6.5. I think they win the game outright. Miami has not played a game in this inclement of weather since 2013. Mario Cristobal is not great in November. Leads me to believe you take the points. I think Pitt wins outright. Bama wins on the road. I'm giving the 5.5. Bad matchup for Auburn. Their pass defense will not be able to hold up against Ty Simpson in that passing game. And Ole Miss, on the back of Kewan Lacey, runs the football past Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. I'm giving the 6.5 there, and Ole Miss wins that game. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm certainly very thankful for a lot of things, and a lot of that is you, the college football fan. I wouldn't be able to do this show. Those of us that produce and work on this show would not be able to do this and talk about what we love if there weren't people to listen. And so I'm going to start with my gratefulness and thankfulness for the college football fan. You are passionate, you care, and I know that we always don't agree on everything, and that's fine. That's totally fine. And you know what? That's great. And I love the comments down below that do disagree. And what I love about this show is, generally speaking, we do it respectfully, and we disagree in a respectful manner. And that's going to happen, because if you just agree with everything that I say, then there's probably something wrong with you. You don't have agency, right? There's going to be times when you disagree, and that's great, because we love this sport and we're passionate about this sport. And all we care about here at the Joel Klatt Show is that college football becomes better every single year. Very thankful for you. I'm very thankful for everybody that works on this show. Steve Owens, my right-hand man, I talk with him multiple times every single day. We work on the games. We work on this pod. I could not be more thankful for Steve Owens, so thank you, Steve. Catherine Cordaggi, you are a rock. You run everything here. You basically run my life outside of Sarah. So, Catherine, thank you for everything you do. And the entire staff here at the Joel Klatt Show, I'm very thankful for you. I'm grateful for you. All the work that you put in that no one even knows and sees. You guys make this whole thing go. I'm also thankful for my family. Sarah, I love you so much. Boys, I love you. Henry, Sam, Theo, you're my rock. I love you guys. This is why I come to work every day, is for you. Have a great weekend of college football. I hope you enjoy the games. I hope you enjoy the game. Gus, Ginny, and I will have the call at noon on Saturday on Fox. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.